Okay, I guess just first a few general observations that I found there, and of course there was the drones. I don't need to mention those anymore, except there was some booths that had drones in them, and I couldn't figure out why they had drones. That was kind of what I was doing over several days, of trying to figure out what this booth had to do with drones. I think it was just decoration. Next is the IP distribution. There's I noticed if you go, I went to Evertz, and of course we've talked previous years about their Evertz IP routing solution that they have, and companies are starting to jump on board to that. Sony is now on board with Evertz for going through their distribution system, and this is using the standard, well, if you call it standard, but the what we know as a sort of broadcast router type thing, but it's a IP router, whereas just next door at Imagine, they have IP distribution, but they're looking at the common off-the-shelf for distribution, whether it's a Cisco switch or Brocade. Their distribution is using the sort of common switches for that, rather than using the more expensive sort of proprietary type switches. And so the question is, if you're going to IP, do you want to go with the one Evertz with Sony and other companies getting involved with it, that is going to be very expensive and perhaps limiting when you're first starting into it? Or do you want to go with Imagine, that you can maybe enter in it and sort of put your toe in the water there and try it out, because you could get a Cisco or Brocade switch and start getting involved with that. Sony in their booth had 4K ready IP production switcher, and they had it in a mobile truck there, and they had lots of IP stuff there. There's more equipment showing IP outputs at GVG. There were cameras there with IP outputs. I expect as each year goes along here, there's going to be more and more IP there. Another thing I heard mentioned a whole lot at some of the booths I was going to and looking at was the cloud. And of course, the cloud means different things to different people depending on how you're using it and the context in which you're using it. And I guess in some cases, for example, when you're talking about transcoding in the cloud, what that quite often means is using a third-party a company like Amazon or Microsoft to be able to transcode, or maybe it's one of the transcoding companies that's doing it, but it's not your company. Whereas in other cases, companies like Imagine have master controls in the cloud. And they, you might have, I work for Rogers, so for example, Rogers might have data centers where they'd have their own master controls in the cloud, but it'd be their own data centers that they would manage in different locations. I was at Oracle, and they were talking about how their archiving can be in the cloud. And so there's ways that you can use the cloud. I noticed it doesn't have to be all or nothing. The transcoding was good, where you could buy a transcoding system, hardware, and transcoding systems that we're used to now, but you only have to buy what you need. And then if it suddenly goes beyond what you are capable of doing in the next year or so with those systems, there's a service you can get so that you can take all the configurations you have for your encoders, and you can put that into the cloud, and you can just sort of overrun, and now you have to pay for a service to do that, so there's a service cost. But that's a good way where you don't have to spend more than you need to, and as you get those service charges in, you can always use that to justify maybe getting more capital equipment next time. And but then that leads me to think about the difference between capital and operating expenses. If everything starts going into the cloud, that's not really, that's a service base, that's a operating expense. And so we've been used to, when we're doing projects, that it's a capital expense. You buy the equipment. You buy the transcoders, you buy the master control equipment, you buy the closed captioning, and you buy that capital equipment, and then you're kind of done, and there's no real operating cost. But if things are going in the cloud, and you have master controls in the cloud, transcoding in the cloud, closed captioning in the cloud, that's an operating expense. So I'm thinking we really need to start thinking about how accounting is set up for engineering projects if things are going to start being service-based. So that was something that maybe we need to talk to our accountants about as to how we might handle that. Some more specifics. I was looking at transcoding systems. At Harmonic, I noticed that they are phasing out their Rosette carbon coders in favor of their ProMedia Express encoders. But they have a file-based workflow engine called WFS. And so if you have the WFS, you can use the old carbon coders with the new Express as well. I was at Telestream Vantage, and they have a really nice looking GUI there actually that I was impressed with. Easy to use. They offer dynamic ad insertion now for VOD and things, so that was interesting. And they own Mac Caption as well, so captioning looks pretty good with them. I also looked at Imagine transcoders and, if I say it right, Delete Amberfin transcoders as well, and they're sort of in the same class. One of the transcoders I looked at surprised me because it was in the Wohler booth. Now, this was something that, when I think of Wohler, I think of audio monitors, maybe video monitors, but I was surprised when I found Wohler, it was in the upper south hall where all the test equipment was. And Wohler now is really presenting themselves, although they do make audio monitors and video monitors, presenting themselves more as a test equipment company. They have a transcoding system, they have something called Wormhole, which actually is able to take a video program, video and audio, and shrink it down in size without theoretically being noticed, so you can actually fit a longer program into a shorter time. And one of the things I was interested in is a product that they were showcasing there, which isn't available yet, they said June, which was, because I was looking for test equipment for closed captioning, and they have this HDSDI, ASI, and IP stream analyzer, but it's built into a video monitor. It's like a quad monitor, and you can use a just IP, a web interface into it, and you can get sort of all the data out on the streams. But on the video monitors, it actually shows you can set it up with information on the screen. So I thought it would be a good way to look at stuff in your central equipment room or engineering office. And speaking of closed captioning, I stopped by the EEG booth to look at their internet closed captioning they have there, because we're having troubles these days with closed captioning with using analog phone lines, because it's hard for the captioners to get analog modems anymore, and analog phone lines aren't really analog, they're sort of digital in the middle now, and they're always dropping off and things. And we've looked at the ICAP product before, but this year it seemed to be much more stable, more interesting. It has a return video on it. It has the ability to log and monitor, and so that looked pretty interesting. Speaking of closed captioning again and logging, stopped by Volacon for looking at logging, and they have products that you can take the actual audio in the program that you're recording on the log and compare that dialogue to the closed captioning text to see if there's actually possibly errors. You can set thresholds, and you can create graphs and reports, and then you can go back on the graphs and go, well, this is a spike that's beyond this threshold, let's look at that, and it brings you to that video so that you can actually see if there really are problems. They even talked about importing ASRun logs into their monitoring and stuff, so that you could single out commercials and cut those out, create files, put them into a watch folder, and even have advertising clients and come in and they have their own watch folders with their commercials in it as played, so you can have that, look at that instead of having to go through all the logs and things for them. Stopped by an interesting, out in the outside area where all the trucks and stuff were, there was a company called Rec4 Box out of Montreal, and they had a great little 26-foot trailer. And this trailer was actually, it's based on Ross's open truck concept. And in the Ross booth, I saw it last year. I have a background in microwave and satellite trucks, and I saw their open truck there. I wasn't actually overly impressed with it because I thought they jammed too much into it. But then when I saw this Rec4 box, it was actually pretty amazing because it was 26 feet long, seemed a lot bigger in the inside. It's just a trailer. They pull it with a Dodge Ram truck. Uses 35 amps to operate the whole thing, heated, cooling. It's from a company that actually built this for themselves so that they could rent it out, and now people wanted to buy it, so now they build these things. But it's got a carbonite switcher in it, a Struder Vista console, it's got the Rydell intercom. It's actually a pretty cool little truck, and it looks very economical. It can do up to like 12 cameras, so it's not a Dome Productions double expando mobile, and it's not intended to be, but it looks pretty good for like a mid-size type production. I was at Quantel looking, they have a live touch system, which is similar to like an EVS. At Rogers, we're a Quantel-based system, so I was looking at that because when it ties into the Quantel system, it can grab all the clips and use them for editing, so it goes sort of beyond what you could do with the EVS. Speaking EVS, there's another cloud-based system there called CCast, where you can use the EVS system from the trucks, and actually this is used now on the Rogers Game Center Plus or Game Plus for getting VOD content from that to people to their mobile phones and things like that. Chiron actually had a studio media maker control room automation, so it looks like Chiron's getting into a little bit of automation. Now this isn't like an overdrive system, it's more like a sort of breaking news type thing, single camera sort of remote control type thing. They're into that. Looked at some archiving systems at Panasonic and Sony. They have Blu-ray disc systems, which they're hoping they're going to compete with the LTO type systems. DeGero has a new box called the NGO, which goes on the back of the camera, which they've shown before, but this one's smaller and holds both American and Canadian SIM cards in it. Stopped at Net Insight to look at their fiber equipment, which is kind of competitive with Evertz, but they also use Schedule to be able to schedule it, so you can create a fiber network across the country and schedule it all for have people use that. So just to conclude, I'm just thinking about the cloud-based stuff. It kind of initially scared me about all this cloud-based master controls and everything else, but if you think about the cloud, doesn't have to be a third-party company. It can be in your own data center. Perhaps it might be your IT people that are running all the servers, but as broadcast engineers, we'd still be maintaining the software and setting it all up and setting the configurations and everything like that. So I made a note to myself, I gotta be more open to thinking about cloud-based things. Just like a few years ago, we had to think about the difference between linear and non-linear editing. I think things are going that way. And then with the IP, you kind of got to choose between common off the shelf or sort of broadcast standard type stuff. And as far as the drones go, I think they've kind of saturated. I don't think we'll see as many of those companies there next year. But so that's basically my observations.
Thanks, Brian.